In an era marked by escalating tensions between the United States and China, the ongoing trade war initiated by former President Donald Trump presents a complex tapestry of economic and geopolitical challenges. As tariffs on Chinese goods have surged from an initial 54% to a staggering 145%, the ramifications are felt not only in trade but also in international military dynamics. The shadow of historical conflicts looms large, echoing pre-World War II events that saw the U.S. impose severe restrictions on Japan, ultimately leading to the infamous attack on Pearl Harbor. The current climate is fraught with military posturing, notably illustrated by China's recent live-fire drills around Taiwan, which some analysts interpret as a demonstration of tactics that could be employed should a conflict arise over the island. Reports of invasion barges and aggressive maneuvers in the South China Sea further amplify concerns about Beijing's intentions. As tensions simmer, the Chinese government has made it clear that it perceives the trade war not as a mere economic dispute but as part of a broader struggle against U.S. hegemony. If war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight till the end, stated China's foreign ministry, underscoring the gravity of the situation. As the U.S. administration navigates this fraught landscape, there seems to be a dichotomy between Trump's approach and that of his predecessors. While the former president's rhetoric has been characterized by a focus on tariffs, his administration's military strategy appears less coherent, with officials suggesting a shift in focus away from direct military competition with China. This change has raised eyebrows among experts who worry that a lack of clear communication and strategic clarity could lead to miscalculations that might spiral into conflict. The recent history of U.S.-China relations is marked by this uneasy balancing act between economic interdependence and military rivalry. Despite the tariffs, the U.S. remains reliant on Chinese technology and materials critical for defense industries. With China imposing restrictions on rare earth metals essential for American military applications, the paradox of being economically intertwined with a potential adversary becomes starkly apparent. This dependence complicates the narrative of decoupling, as both nations grapple with the implications of severing economic ties. In light of these developments, experts warn that the ongoing trade war could inadvertently increase the likelihood of military confrontation. The potential for miscommunication is exacerbated by the current lack of diplomatic engagement, particularly following China's suspension of military talks after Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan in 2022. Evan Medeiros, a former senior director for Asia on the White House National Security Council, articulated this concern, stating, "The prospects for a serious strategic miscommunication leading to military action is very, very serious." The economic landscape is also shifting. Major corporations including Apple are beginning to reassess their supply chains, with moves to relocate production away from China in an effort to mitigate risks associated with the trade war. This trend of friendshoring reflects a growing sentiment among U.S. lawmakers to reduce reliance on adversarial nations. Yet, the potential downsides of such decoupling could lead to a reduction in the dialogue that has historically helped manage tensions. Yoon Sun of the Stimson Center cautions that a continued tariff war could diminish the incentive for both countries to resolve their issues collaboratively, leaving them on a collision course. As China embarks on its next 5-year development plan aimed at solidifying its status as a global superpower, the stakes are high. President Xi Jinping's emphasis on adapting to external challenges highlights the urgency with which China is approaching its rivalry with the U.S. The question remains, can economic interdependence act as a stabilizing force, or will it ultimately lead both nations toward a precarious path of confrontation? Looking ahead, the world watches closely as the U.S.-China trade war unfolds, with its implications extending far beyond economics into the realm of global security. The interplay of tariffs, military maneuvers, and diplomatic relations will define the future of this fraught relationship, reinforcing the notion that in this new era of great power competition, the potential for conflict is ever present. As both nations navigate this complex landscape, the hope remains that dialogue will prevail over discord, preventing a misstep that could lead to a much graver outcome. As the US-China trade war intensifies, the implications extend far beyond economic exchanges, raising urgent questions about the potential for military conflict. The historical echoes of past confrontations loom large as the Trump administration implements drastic tariffs on Chinese goods, with rates soaring to 145%. This aggressive economic strategy, reminiscent of pre-World War II tensions with Japan, has sparked not only retaliatory measures from Beijing but also heightened military posturing in the Asia-Pacific region. In the early days of April 2025, as President Trump announced these tariffs, Chinese military exercises around Taiwan showcased the growing tensions. Analysts noted that these drills were particularly significant, revealing tactical insights into how China might approach a potential conflict over the island. The juxtaposition of economic warfare with military readiness has led to a chilling realization: the trade war could inadvertently escalate into a real war. China's foreign ministry has made it clear that if the US seeks war, whether it be through tariffs or otherwise, we're ready to fight till the end. The trade war has transformed the US-China relationship into a precarious dance of economic sanctions and military threats. While the Trump administration has hinted at a desire for dialogue, the Chinese government has shown little interest in engaging with US leadership, instead focusing on strengthening its own position. The lack of communication channels further exacerbates the risk of miscalculation, with both sides potentially interpreting actions through the lens of their ongoing economic hostilities. Recent reports highlight the immediate economic fallout from the trade conflict. A significant slowdown in Chinese manufacturing activity was recorded in April, with the Purchasing Managers' Index (PMI) dropping to 49.0, signaling contraction. This decline, attributed largely to the new tariffs, has led to predictions of severe job losses. Estimates suggest that around 16 million jobs in China could be at risk if the trade policies persist. Economists warn that the ongoing disruptions could not only harm both economies but also trigger a global recession. In the US, businesses are already feeling the pinch. Major corporations like United Parcel Service have announced significant job cuts in response to the economic uncertainty stemming from the trade conflict. Consumer confidence has also dipped to its lowest level in 5 years, signaling that the broader population is bracing for the impacts of sustained tariffs. Despite the escalating tensions, some analysts argue that the interconnectedness of the two economies could serve as a buffer against outright conflict. The notion of decoupling, or reducing interdependence between the US and China, has gained traction among policymakers. However, this move could lead to a decrease in dialogue and cooperation. As Yun Sun from the Stimson Center points out, if the trade war continues unchecked, the economic ties that could help mitigate conflicts may erode, leaving the two nations vulnerable to misunderstandings that could spiral into military confrontation. The historical context of trade as a deterrent to war cannot be ignored. Philosophers and economists have long suggested that commerce fosters peace, yet the current landscape challenges this assumption. As the world navigates these uncharted waters, the potential for miscommunication and miscalculation remains alarmingly high. Looking ahead, the future of US-China relations hinges on how both nations manage the current crisis. With the stakes at an all-time high, the hope is that economic interdependence will encourage a return to diplomacy, averting the catastrophic consequences of a miscalculated military engagement. As the situation evolves, the global community watches closely, recognizing that the implications of this trade war extend far beyond tariffs and trade balances. They may well determine the course of international relations for years to come. In a world increasingly defined by economic competition and geopolitical tension, the escalating trade war between the United States and China has sparked concerns that it could lead to military conflict. The historical context of such economic confrontations raises alarm bells, particularly when one considers the catastrophic consequences of similar circumstances in the past. As the U.S. implements significant tariffs on Chinese goods, now rising to 145%, the interplay between economic measures and military posturing has never been more critical. Joshua Keating, a senior correspondent at Vox, draws parallels between the current trade war and the U.S. embargoes imposed on Japan before World War II. Beginning in 1940. These embargoes were intended to stifle Japan's military ambitions but ultimately provoked a catastrophic military response at Pearl Harbor. We're not quite there yet, Keating warns, but the atmosphere surrounding the U.S.-China trade conflict is undeniably fraught with tension. Just as President Trump announced substantial tariffs, China conducted extensive live-fire military drills around Taiwan, underscoring the precarious nature of the situation. Furthermore, Keating highlights that the Chinese government perceives the trade war not merely as an economic dispute but as a direct challenge to its sovereignty and global aspirations. When the U.S. declared its first round of tariffs, Chinese officials responded with a stark message: if war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight till the end. This rhetoric hints at a broader narrative where economic and military strategies are increasingly intertwined. As the White House contemplates potential negotiations to ease tensions, experts like Zach Cooper from the American Enterprise Institute caution against the risks of miscalculations. The atmosphere of mistrust fostered by the ongoing trade war could lead to grave misunderstandings, with military provocations being misconstrued as responses to economic aggression. Former National Security Council official Evan Medeiros echoes this sentiment, warning that the lack of communication channels between the two nations exacerbates the potential for conflict. In an insightful analysis, Brendan Mulvaney, director of the China Aerospace Studies Institute, emphasizes the strategic differences that define U.S.-China relations. He observes that China's state-controlled system enables it to pursue long-term military objectives more effectively than the U.S., which operates within a more fragmented political framework. Mulvaney points out that while China's military modernization continues apace, its focus remains primarily regional, with its naval capabilities concentrated in the South China Sea. Despite the growing military capabilities on both sides, experts largely agree that neither country seeks a direct military confrontation. However, the intertwining of economic and military strategies raises critical questions about the implications of continued decoupling. The U.S. remains economically dependent on China for essential technologies and materials, complicating the prospect of a clear-cut separation of interests. Recent decisions by companies like Apple to shift production from China to India underscore the broader trend toward friendshoring, a strategy aimed at reducing reliance on adversaries. Yet, as Yun Sun from the Stimson Center warns, this decoupling could inadvertently decrease the incentives for dialogue. The potential for conflict, she argues, may become more pronounced without the economic interdependence that has historically provided both nations with a stake in maintaining peace. The current tariff war echoes a broader historical pattern where economic rivalries have often preceded military conflicts. As the world watches the U.S.-China relationship unfold, it is clear that the stakes are high. The notion that trade can prevent war, a concept dating back to philosopher John Stuart Mill, seems increasingly tenuous in today's landscape of aggressive economic policy and military posturing. The future remains uncertain, and while the horrors of war may serve as a deterrent, the risk of miscommunication looms larger than ever. As both nations navigate this complex and evolving relationship, the hope is that the lessons of history will guide them toward a more stable and cooperative future, lest they find themselves sleepwalking into a conflict that neither truly desires.